Alright, the stream is starting, baby. Let's go. Here to rank more anime and drink more drinks I've never had before. I was just barely setting up the wheel to spin to see which drink we're drinking today. We have three different ones. We have the aloe vera pomegranate, we have the Warheads watermelon, and then the Jumex nectar mango. No idea. Never had any of these, so I have no idea how they're actually going to taste. From what I can understand, probably bad. I've had some of the aloe vera, which aloe vera is hit and miss, and some of the Jumex, and Jumex has mostly been misses. But yeah, so let's spin to find out what we drink. Alright, we're going Jumex. Of course, as always, you have the Holy Taco Bell cup to put it in. Wow, the tab just broke off. That's entertaining. But yeah, I think we only have about 170 more anime to go through before we're finally completed with the list. But as soon as that happens, it's going to be an exciting thing. Still debating what I want to do for the next streams. Because we have a bunch of games that I've never played before, so I'm debating whether or not I want to play one of those. I'm thinking of possibly either doing Doki Doki Literature Club or Slay the Princess. Both of those seemed like interesting games to play. But yeah, without further ado, let's get into ranking anime. Alright, yeah, so we have the list right here. First one we're starting off with is going to be So I'm a Spider, So What? This one is one of my friend's favorites. He really liked it. It's also another isekai. In terms of isekai, I think it's a bit better than the average isekai, but it does kind of have that same tropes that most power level isekais have, where you're, start off really weak and then just grow to be ridiculously strong. Though I did really like how the time aspect of it made it go, how the times, whenever it would go to different sides of the stories, how sometimes it was in the future and in the past. That was a really unique way of telling the story, which I liked quite a bit. But I don't think it's too high just because it's an isekai. That's a genre that's been kind of done to death. While they did it better than most, we're not gonna put it... Oh, I guess I should probably go through and say what all the rankings are. We have SSS tier. This is peak escapism. Whenever you watch this, you're like, wow, I didn't know that a Earth existed. Only the anime does. SS tier is kind of similar to SSS, and that's what defines an SS tier, but unlike an SSS, there isn't any sort of... There's moments in time when it kind of loses you. Not necessarily because it's bad, but just because you remember, oh yeah, things like exist. So it's like an SSS, but just not as good. S tier is where there's moments in time when you're watching the show where you're like, yeah, okay, you get into it, but it's not consistent throughout the entire show at all. A is a good show overall, but at no point in time did you forget about the world. B tier is slightly above average. C tier is slightly below average. D tier is in general bad, but not necessarily painful to watch. Then we have F tier. F tier is where it's kind of painful to watch. FF tier is that is the category where you watch the show and you are somehow impressed with yourself for being able to finish a show that was as garbage as that. And then we have the don't remember category, which, believe it or not, means I don't remember it. Which I think so far we've only had to put one anime down there, which was not what I was expecting at all. But yeah, so I'm a Spider, So What? That is a slightly above average show. Most isekais are going to fall into the C tier, just because they've been done before, and most of them are subpar in their storytelling. But yeah, up next we have The Black Summoner, which is another isekai where the protagonist gets isekai'd and then just has to live and is overpowered, which most isekais go in C tier. Alright, up next we have... I forget the name of this one. In the Heart of Kunoichi Tsubaki. This one was made by the same creator who made the Teasing Master Takagi-san anime, if you guys have ever seen that. it's not a... In terms of show, it was really unique at first. Then, similar to most comedy shows, it kind of falls off more towards the end because it feels like the jokes are really repetitious. And I believe, if I remember correctly, they also kind of fell into the category of kind of starting out as a comedy, then slowly leaning more into drama. While this show didn't lean too far into the drama, it still kind of did that. So for that reason, we're just going to put it B tier, slightly above average. Up next, we have Black Butler. Now, Black Butler is an interesting one. I watched this one originally when I was, this is I think like the second or third anime I ever saw. While watching it, I was like, this is an interesting one, because season 1 is very slice of lifey. But then I found out that whenever you're watching the show, most of it is filler. Most of season 1 and all of season 2 is filler. I think in season 1 there's 6 episodes, either 6, somewhere between 6 and 9 episodes that weren't filler, which is shocking to say the least. But yeah, I went through and rewatched it to get the proper experience, kind of skipped all the filler. So I've seen it twice, one with every episode in it, and then the other time with just the non-filler. And the non-filler is definitely a much better watching experience, and if it were just for the non-filler, it'd probably be an SS anime, but that filler is there, and I do think the filler brings it down a category, so we're just going to stick that in S tier. But yeah, if you haven't seen it without the filler, I would definitely recommend going through and rewatching that. I think it's like episodes 1 through 3, 13 through 16, I think. And then none of season 2, and then everything after that. Non-filler of Black. Where is... yeah, so it's episodes 2 through 6, 13 through 15, and then everything after that. But it's a pretty good show when you watch it without the filler. With the filler, it's still a good show. There's just a lot of weird moments that the show has. Up next, we have Beyond the Boundary. Beyond the Boundary has some of my favorite moments in anime ever. Mostly, if you've ever seen the how best friends greet each other versus normal friends, where it's the hug and then the other one just tackles it. They have a lot of small moments like that where it's just really funny. Despite kind of having a somber mood throughout the show, it does get a little bit confusing at times because the plot doesn't always seem clearly defined. But in terms of show overall, it's probably a solid A tier show. I don't know if I ever got super into it, just because once again it was really kind of confusing in a lot of the aspects of the show. A lot of moments in the time when you're just kind of like, I have no idea what's going on here. But yeah, other than that, it was a solid show. Next, we have one of the ones that came out, I think, last season. Don't remember the name of it right now. The Apothecary Diaries. This one is a great show. I personally really liked it. I actually got the light novel for it, and then remembered that I had already ordered the light novel, so I gave the second copy of it to my friend. But yeah, it was a solid watch. In terms of story, the story flowed really nicely. The characters all seemed pretty well developed throughout the show. It's a mystery, which was really interesting to watch from beginning to end, kind of how they more slowly and slowly like show the mystery and what is happening, and you kind of never have a full picture of the story until like the second to last episode, and at no point in time was it kind of like you got sick of the fact that it just didn't seem to actually tell you anything about the story. But yeah, in terms of show, I'd say it's probably SSS tier. I'd turn on the episode, and as I'm watching it, there was really no points in time when I was really distracted from the show, unless it was like a forced distraction from somebody calling out my name or something. But yeah, SSS show, great characters, great mystery. I am a bit concerned for season 2 though, because I don't know how exactly they plan on continuing on the mystery whenever they have actually kind of revealed most everything. But I can imagine they could still do a bit with the premise of the show. But yeah, next we have Inspector. I am definitely a sucker for anything that has aberrations in them, and Inspector is one of those shows. The main girl is a really fun watch. She's kind of no business mess with the MC kind of character, which was really fun to see. But yeah, interesting story, interesting premise and everything. I did get pretty into it a lot of times, but there were some arcs that seemed to really go on, especially in the manga. The arc with the girl with the beam that she carries around. That one was a very long arc that I kind of got sick of, especially in the manga, because I think that lasts like a full book, if not two. But yeah, this show, probably an S tier. Up next, we have this one, which this is a Slaying the Vampire or something like that. The vampire dies in no time. This one was a really hard one to get into just because the comedy was very slapstick, and I'm not a slapstick comedy person at all. Overall, it was a fantastic watch after you kind of get used to the slapstick comedy, and the comedy does sort of evolve later on to be a little bit more witty, whereas at first it's just like, oh, the vampire died again, that's funny. But yeah, in terms of show, I'd say it's probably A tier. At no point in time was I really invested in it, but it went from being the C tier that it started out as to going up to A tier, especially once you get to know the characters and kind of have more feelings invested into them. Up next, we have... yes, Full Dive. The ultimate next-gen full dive RPG is even crappier than the real life. This one was an interesting watch. It started out garbage, and it's an isekai, believe it or not. He gets isekai'd into a world. Or actually, I think it's just he's gaming, but it all takes place in another world. And throughout the entire story, you're kind of watching this person just play a game and be mad at how bad the game is. In terms of comedy, once again, very slapstick. They do have a yandere, or I think it is, yeah. But in terms of show, it was somewhat painful to watch, but not enough, I think, to actually put it in F tier, so we're going to go ahead and put it in D tier. Up next, we have In the Land of Lidl, another isekai. There's a lot of those. But yeah, it's a girl gets transported into a game that she used to play, and she just explores the game, like reminiscing about the past and everything that happened in the game, seeing like her NPC children actually in real life and like meeting them and hanging out with them, so on and so forth. In terms of isekai, it's a bit better than the normal isekai, I think, kind of more on the higher end, but I don't know if I could actually put it above the isekai barrier. Only the actual good isekai get to go above that. Next, we have my level 1 skill is overpowered, if I think. My unique skill makes me OP even at level 1 is what it's called. This one, garbage. In terms of isekai. So we have isekai for C tier, D for crappy isekai. D for don't watch this isekai. That is where this show belongs. Liar Liar is one of those shows where it's a game show, kind of like a no game, no life wannabe. And the comedy throughout the entire show is, once again, very slapstick in that anime way. Not a very good show. You know, the characters aren't most of the time very likable. The dude mostly gets to be the top spot purely because he's lucky, which isn't a very compelling plot point in my mind. It's one of those shows where a person gets put in a position where they have to kind of fake it to make it. And a lot of those shows I find really painful. I know School Rock was another one that kind of did that, and that was a really hard watch for me, despite being kind of revered as such a fantastic show. But yeah, this one we're going to put in probably D tier. It wasn't, actually no, it was painful to watch, so we're going to put it in F tier. I'm not surprised that I finished it though, so we're not going any lower than that. Alright, up next, we have another isekai, but this is a villainess isekai, and at least the first few villainess isekais that have come out have been very good in terms of quality. I think there's only been like 1 or 2 that I've seen that I'm like, I actually don't like this. Mostly because I think it's more of a fresh point of view on the isekai genre, and so the people that doing it are kind of setting what the tropes are going to be for the future villainess anime. But this one's a fantastic one. It's the 7th time loop villainess, and basically this one, she dies. Well, I guess it's not technically an isekai. It's more of a time loop, yeah. But yeah, in terms of show, it was a very good show overall. The characters were very compelling, story was compelling. The girl and the guy do kind of have that similar relationship where it's like, oh, he's a bad boy and she's into that type story. But overall, in terms of the show, I do think it was an SS tier. It was very easy to get sucked into every single episode. and it's really sad that there's not a season 2 to it. Alright, after that we have another anime. I think this one is Log Horizon? Yeah, Log Horizon. Log Horizon, another isekai. There's a lot on this list. Log Horizon, they get isekai'd into the game. This one is revered as one of the better isekais out there. Personally, I thought it was maybe B tier just because there were a lot of points in the show when I was watching and I was like, this isn't bad by any means. I am enjoying watching it, and I think it did set some of the staples for the video game isekais, but the whole fact that they like lose memories when they die and everything, and they actually do respawn, which I don't think a lot of other game isekais have, was very interesting to watch, as well as the dynamics between the gamer community on top of the NPCs, or I guess the Once Upon a Time NPCs. Up next, we have Love Live. Love Live, I wasn't a huge fan of it. I know that they have a very dedicated fan base, but I'm definitely not a part of that fan base. But it wasn't a bad watch by any means, so I'll probably put it in B tier. But a lot of idle animes are just kind of very hard to get into. I think the only one that I've seen and actually really enjoyed was Zombieland Saga. But there were some really interesting characters in this show that was fun to watch, kind of evolve and kind of have their character chains happen. Up next we have Love Lab, which is basically a bunch of girls who talk about love in a school club. The main girl goes into the club and brags about how she has a boyfriend, and then everyone else is like, oh my gosh, that's so cool, teach us how to do this. But plot twist, she hasn't had a boyfriend, so it's another, she gets put into a situation where she is very much not able to, doesn't have a lot of knowledge in it, put in a situation where she kind of has to once again fake it till you make it. Comedy was very, in order to get you to laugh, was more raunchy than anything else, which once again, not a huge fan of. But there were a few funny moments into the show. I don't know if I would say it was bad, but I'd say it was probably below average. Up next, we have, yet again, another isekai. This one, a dude gets isekai'd from a fantasy world into another fantasy world, which you don't see too often. Yeah, level 2 character. Let's see what it is. Chilling in another world with level 2 super cheat powers. You can typically tell from an anime whether or not it's going to be bad based on the title and how long it is, and how much it actually describes the show. But yeah, this one, solid D tier. It's one of the worst off isekais, and the main girl is one of those people who falls in love with the main guy and is like, oh yeah, I love you so much, I'm basically going to be your slave. And it's just not a very compelling character type. Up next, we have Lucky Star. First episode of Lucky Star I started watching, and that was probably one of the most painfully boring pieces of media I have consumed in years, because it is they spend an entire episode talking about a chocolate-filled pastry almost. A solid, just based off the first episode alone, I'd probably put it in FF, but then as you watch it on, you kind of get to know the characters more and you start to enjoy it more. I don't think that first episode is definitely a very hard barrier to get on, or I guess the first few episodes are. But yeah, I'd probably put it in A tier. I don't know if I ever got like too invested into the show, but I wouldn't say it was just barely above average. It might have made it to S tier if that first episode just wasn't so painful. Up next, we have Maiden Abyss. This one is a very fun one in the sense that it is not fun at all and very painful to watch. It's very dark. That's all I'm going to say about it. It starts off very cute, gets dark later on though. It's very easy to get invested into. We're probably going to go ahead and stick it into SS tier, into the double S tier, which is I think that's a fair placement of that one. I know a lot of people absolutely love it. But yeah, solid show. Up next we have Licorice Recoil, which is very surprising that this one is an anime original. I went to go try and find the source material for it because it was such a good show, but it was an original made by, I don't know who the director was, but they did a really good job with the show. Which, it's mostly surprising just because anime originals tend to be some of the worst anime out there, other than the isekais that are adapted from the various light novels written. But yeah, this one, solid, I would probably say SSS tier. The characters were fun to watch. Well, SS tier. There were a few times whenever I got drawn out of the show, but overall, fantastic watch. I would definitely recommend it to anybody who's wanting to watch a kind of action comedy. I think it's a CGDCT. I think it can be considered in that category, but in terms of show, fantastic show. Up next, we have the, crap, what's this one called? The full title. The Ancient Magnus Bride. This one is another one that has a very somber mood to it, but it's a very interesting how they portray the main character and her traumas. The traumas are very well done throughout the entire show, I think, as well as a lot of the romance developments, and the fact that like it starts off with the guy being like, hey, I want you to be my wife, but as the story progresses, you kind of realize that that guy doesn't really even know what he's saying. He's kind of just like trying to mimic human life, and it's very interesting watch. Probably another SS show. Up next, we have The Wandering Witchy Lane, which admittedly I am probably more partial to this show than not. I love shows where it's like people traveling to different places and experiencing thing versus thing, like similar to Kino's Journey, as well as that one recent one that came out that's #1 on MAL right now. Furiren, I think it's called. Yeah, that one. But yeah, this one, similar to those, it's really good. Very easy to get invested in. There's a few points in time in the show where it kind of dips in quality a little bit, just because sometimes the places that she goes are just so almost messed up that it's very jarring to go from like, oh, here's this really happy place where all these people are happy, and then you travel to this another place where it's like, you don't necessarily start off feeling that it's like a bad place to be, but there's something that feels off to it, and then it just goes dark, like really dark without any sort of expectation. But yeah, so for that reason, we're probably only going to stick it in the S tier. But solid show overall, would recommend. Next up, we have Welcome to Demon School, Iruma-kun. And this one, really, it's one of those absurdity is the funny part, where a lot of things happen and he's just kind of going through the absurdity of all of the different demons within the show. Probably, in terms of quality, I'd rank it a little bit on the lower end, just because it gets very old as you continue on, because there's only so much you can do. And admittedly, that green-haired character, I really don't like her. She's really annoying, and she was kind of hard to watch on screen. But I think a lot of people, at least in the comment section on Crunchyroll, really loved her. But yeah, this show, I'd probably put it in B tier. It wasn't very... It definitely... I wouldn't say it was below average, because it was unique in its premise, and it was, at times, very funny to watch and entertaining to watch, but it just kind of dragged on for too long. Alright, I think this one is My Stepsister is My Ex? No, My Stepmom's Daughter is My Ex. So, basically, My Stepsister is My Ex. This one, is what led me to learn that you can actually, in fact, marry your stepsister. There's not very many laws against that, which is surprising. I don't know if I would ever understand where someone is coming from when they do it. In terms of romance, it's kind of mediocre. Another one where they seem to almost be pushing the romance, but they never actually really go into it until the last episode, when there's like, oh hey, there's a potential for a romance, despite the fact that the entire show you kind of know that that's where it's going to go. I'd probably put it in C, slightly below average, which is rare for me to put something that low, just because, you know, it's a romance. That's one of my favorite categories, one of my favorite genres. Up next, we have... once again, I don't remember the names to the shows. Tragic that I forget all these things. It is An Archdemon's Dilemma, How to Love Your Elf Bride. This one was a very fun watch for the first few episodes, I think. Very entertaining. There were a few points in the show when they tried to go from comedy to being very drama-y and kind of like bringing up, oh, this is like a very serious moment, you have to be serious in a comedy show, which I don't think fits a lot of comedy shows. But in terms of show, I would say it was above average. I don't know if I would say it was like fantastic, especially because the comedy aspect of it kind of gets repetitious after a few episodes. But yeah, there were a few moments in time when I really enjoyed what I was watching, and you actually felt that the entire show was really cute. Yeah, up next we have something about a demon, Misfits a Demon King Academy. Whenever I was a general manager at Domino's, there was one person who whenever I would mention anime, he would always be like, "Oh, I know this one. I've seen this one anime. This one, yeah, you know which one it is." And then he would talk to me about that because that is the only anime he would watch, and I think he was trying really hard to fit in, which was cool of him for putting on effort. So good on him. But in all honesty, the show's a D tier. It's not good. It's honestly painful. It's an isekai, one of the worst off isekais. The dude's powerful and basically gets a bunch of followers, mostly girls, because he's powerful. Oh boy, gotta love those power fantasies. Alright, up next we have Demon... I think it's like Demon King Retry? Demon Lord Retry. This one's another isekai, believe it or not. Dude gets transported into a fantasy world where he is his character, and his character that he had created was a demon, and he saves people as a demon and they follow him. It was definitely above average on the isekai scale just because it was funny. A lot of the jokes never felt like they were used too often, and a lot of the character tropes were entertaining to watch, but it's definitely one of those hidden gems. I don't think a lot of people talk about it very much. But in terms of isekai, I don't know if it breaks that barrier to make it into the B tier or higher for isekais. Actually, yeah, it's slightly above average, I'd say. So yeah, we'll stick that one in B tier then. Alright, up next, we have Masame-kun's no Revenge. Masame's Revenge, I think is what the English title is. This one is a story. Very interesting premise, very fun premise. Starts out, the main girl starts out with way back in the past where the dude confesses his love to the main girl, and the main girl is like, "Oh, I'll never love you." And he's like, "Ah, snap, that sucks." Then he decides whenever they get into high school, after working on himself and becoming the hottest, most attractive person he can, fit, 6-pack, probably 6 feet, basically set up life to make 6 figures, he goes, and his main goal is to make his past crush fall in love with him. Only for the fact that he wants to break her heart, like how she broke his. In terms of show, it was really good, especially on the earlier episodes. I haven't seen season 2 to it yet, but I do think it definitely fell off whenever towards the final episodes, just because I don't want to spoil it, but it definitely falls off, I think, in those last episodes, because the main character kind of does something where it's like, bro, that kind of breaks the premise a little bit there. Up next, we have Mashal, Magic and Muscle. This one is a play on Harry Potter, and one of the most popular songs, I think it's in the top 100 in the world right now, is Bring Bang Bang, Born, I think it's called. And that one is a fantastic song overall, but in terms of show, it's probably up there on the S tier. At some points in time, the comedy does feel a little bit dry or too absurd to really be entertaining. But throughout the most of the show, it's really funny. It very much plays on Harry Potter. There's a whole Quidditch scene, but the entire premise is that Mash, the main character, is a dude who doesn't have magic in a world where everyone has magic. But he basically has to pretend that he has magic using his muscles. So for instance, during the Quidditch scene, in order to fly on the broom, you might think that, oh, maybe he kicks off the ground and flies that way. No, he just kicks his legs to flap them like wings. Beautiful, beautiful show in that way, and that's why it's an S tier. But yeah, up next we have the Snow White Notes. Those snowy white notes you play, something like that. Those Snow White Notes. This show is a music one, which once again, that's a category that I absolutely love. Kids on the Slope, fantastic show. K-On, loved it. But yeah, this one was almost a wannabe Kids on the Slope. It tried very hard to be very good. There were multiple points in the show where it's this character is playing this song and it's sounding really, you can feel the emotion in the song, but you couldn't really feel the emotion in the song because I don't know what exactly it was, but it kind of feels like they just got a professional to play every single song once, and then that's kind of what they did it off. Whereas shows like Bocchi the Rock, they almost had, whenever they're first starting out, the characters are actually, you can hear kind of the bad playing in the band, which was really interesting to hear. Whereas this one, This one didn't have any of that at all. There wasn't a lot of emotion. You know, you'd listen to the songs and you wouldn't feel what the character's feeling at all like you would in Your Lie in April or any shows like that. I would probably say it was below average. Some of the music was really interesting to listen to, especially since they play an instrument native to Japan. Very, very fun watch for that reason, but I do think you could probably get the same effect if you were to just listen to a compilation of the soundtrack from this show. Up next, we have the Goddesses of the Cafe Terrace and its Goddesses. This one, it's a harem, not a very good one. It's somehow managed to get a season 2, but I don't know why. None of the characters were really likable. They either fall too heavily into their trope or they're just annoying. But yeah, I'd say it was painful to get through that first watch. At no point in time was I like, I really need to drop this show. Like, I am suffering trying to get through this, so I gotta drop it. But yeah. Up next, we have Ao-chan Can't Study, I think? Ao-chan Can't Study? Yeah. This one, I thought it was gonna be like an Aho Girl. I really did. It's a shorts, so it's not super long. It's maybe like I think the episodes are only like 11 minutes each, if even that. So it's at most like 2-hour watch. The show overall was pretty entertaining. The entire premise is this girl has a father who basically filled her mind with a bunch of dirty thoughts. And so whenever this one guy talks to her, she's always misinterpreting it in the worst way that she can, even though the guy is like as wholesome as can be. Not typically a show that I would expect to like, but overall it was pretty good. I would probably put it in A tier. Yeah, up next we have How to Raise a Mummy, I think it is. How to Keep a Mummy. Garbage. I don't know how I got through that. I really don't know how I got through that. That show was peak trash on fire. The entire premise is his dad sends him a little mummy that he has to take care of. It's almost like a show all built around child rearing and making, like, I don't know, children feel loved or something like that, and how to do that, but with something that's not a child, and it tried way too hard to make the mummy cute. As well as with all of the other things. It's almost like Pokemon, where they all get their own starter Pokemon, where they all get like some weird little creature that they have to take care of. Garbage. Complete garbage. How did I finish that? No clue. Same with Military. Military was also garbage. That one was brain rot on steroids. It's a short, though. I think it's only like probably an hour to watch the entire thing, so if you feel like suffering, it's a great show. It's a bunch of little chibi people basically yelling, loud is funny type humor. But yeah, garbage shows. We have Mieruko-chan. This one started off really rough, I think, just because when it starts off, it's very intense moments where like, hey, this is supposed to be a scary point in time right here. Like, let's like get you really invested in it and like have a really tense moment. And then they decide, oh yeah, let's throw a panty shot in here, and it completely breaks the tension whenever that happens. It's like she's in fear of there being a ghost, and so she crawls on the floor, and as she's crawling on the floor, you see from behind and she's wearing a skirt, and it's like, ah, fantastic. That's like way to ruin the immersion. But later on in the series, they stopped doing that, and I think it definitely benefited from that. I think because the season was really rough at first, we're probably going to put it in B tier, because I think that kind of brings it slightly above average, but the premise gets really interesting later on as you kind of watch the show. But yeah, fantastic show. It's a horror about ghosts kind of haunting this girl. If you're into that type of stuff, go ahead and watch it. There's a lot of really interesting parts that happen into it, especially like whenever she starts kind of reading the ghosts almost. Yeah, up next we have Mob Psycho 100. I'm gonna go ahead and say it was S tier. I don't think it really belongs in SSS or SS. I know a lot of people put it that high, but if I'm being completely honest, Raiden, I think, kind of ruined it for me for the first 2 seasons, but then season 3 was like, I think, really well done. Especially, or actually, I guess probably like halfway through season 2, I started to really like the show. But yeah, I don't know if I could really put it in SS or SSS just because it took me so long to actually get into it, but it definitely popped off later on. Up next, we have Momokuri. This one's a fun one because the girl's in love with the guy, but while the girl's in love with the guy, she wants him to fall in love with her. So her way to successfully get him to fall in love is to first learn everything about him, which learning things about the people you love it's I think that's a pretty normal thing to do. But she's like taking pictures of him without him knowing, and then going up to the pictures and like measuring where his height is gonna be, so she can figure out things like his height and a lot of other really creepy things. So she basically stalks him at first in order to learn as much as she can before becoming his girlfriend. Fantastic show though. In terms of comedy, it was pretty funny, and after, besides her kind of like really messed up getting him to fall in love with her type backstory, it was a pretty good comedy. We'll go ahead and stick that in A. It definitely takes a while to almost get over what she did, but yeah, it was a very wholesome during a lot of parts, which I know sounds kind of contradictory whenever you're talking about stalking. Oh, this drink is terrible. Gosh. Up next, we have Princess Momonoke, one of the better known Studio Ghibli films. Yeah, in terms of show, it's really good, very investing. The deeper meaning to it was, I felt, not too forced at all. It was very fun to watch, fun to get the two perspectives. I really like shows that kind of go in and give you perspectives on like two different halves, two different sides of the story. I'm probably going to put this in SS tier. I did get invested, but there were a few points in times when that investment kind of broke. But yeah, typical Studio Ghibli film, wonderfully animated, very almost like a homely animation style. Yeah, up next we have, oh geez, Problem Children Are Coming from Another World, aren't they? This is another power fantasy isekai absurdism type where absurdity is supposed to be the main humor point, and it's okay. Like most isekai, I don't think it really belongs in anything than C tier. We have a Monogatari, not to be confused with the Monogatari series. This one is completely different, definitely takes itself more seriously than the Monogatari series. This one I would probably say is A tier. I don't know if I'd rank it too high, just because it's very hard to get invested into it. But yeah, throughout the entire show, there's a lot of points in time where you're like, oh shoot, that's really cool. It's a revenge story where the main character wants to get revenge for his two siblings, and so he's basically wants revenge on this specific type of aberration, almost. But he has to learn that, oh, not all aberrations are bad, some of them are actually good, and to do that he's forced into an area and has to live with them and learn from them. And it's interesting to watch him kind of go through that story, but I don't know if it's super easy to get actually invested in. Next we have Monster Musume, one of those shows that kind of likes to push the boundaries of anime. Honestly, C tier, don't like harems, way too much ecchi, not my type of show at all. Fun story about this show though, when I worked at Domino's, one of the managers, way back before I had even become a manager, was I was talking to him about this show, and he's like, bro, you actually finished that show? That show was like garbage. Like, I watched episode 1 and it's like first 2 minutes in, just boobs in my face, and I was like, I couldn't finish that, man. And I was like, oh, come on, man, you gotta give it more of a chance, like give it at least a few episodes. And he's like, no, I'm not doing it. Long story short, we managed to me and this one other guy, he joins in as well, trying to convince him to at least give the show a much better shot. He's like, fine, I'll watch some episodes of it. I'll watch some of them, all right? Just a few, though. Like, I'll watch 10 episodes. And I was like, oh, shoot. I'm used to people, like, watching 12 episodes of anime at this point in time. And he's like, I'll watch 10 episodes. That's 2 away from just the entire series. And I'm like, all right, let's do a little bit of a negotiation here. There's only 12 episodes in the show. What's going to get him to say 12? I'm like, no, you should watch 15 episodes to the show. The other dude who's trying to get him to watch with me kind of looks at me confused, because he knows that there's only 12 episodes in the show. He's like, 15? There's not 15 episodes. The other manager is like, 12 episodes. And I'm like, you got a deal. And then me and the other guy just laugh, because he doesn't know that he's just committed to finishing the thing. Very, very fun watch. Season 2 was announced, though it looks like it'll probably never come. Great show over not great show. Like I said, it's a very... I have a fond memory attached to it, so that kind of tricks me sometimes into thinking it's better than it is, but In all honesty, it's C tier, maybe even D tier. I don't know if I want to rank it that low though. All right, up next we have Myriad Colors Phantom World, I think. Myriad Colors Phantom World. This one was an interesting one in the sense that, similar to that one popular show that I don't care to remember the name of, but everyone has quirks in this one, a lot of people have powers, and they're basically, once again, trying to solve aberrations. I don't know what it is about shows with aberrations that makes me like them so much, but yeah, this one, some of the comedy aspects kind of fall off whenever it leans more towards ecchi or absurdism, but they do have a lot of very interesting character developing stories. I never got super invested into it, but it wasn't hard to like sit down and actually watch the entire season. I think it took me 2 days to watch the 12 or 13 episodes. I don't remember how many there are in it, but yeah, it's a fun watch. Never got super invested, but I'd recommend it. Up next, we have Talentless Nana. This one, when you first watch it, it's kind of like some people have superpowers, and this one girl doesn't, but she has to kind of fit into this world into an island where all these people are like have superpowers and have to kind of become better, trained to use them almost. Super interesting show, honestly. In terms of what happens in the plot, I don't want to spoil it too much, because the plot twist, I want to say, kind of comes in around episode 3 or 4, but it's super interesting. They get you really invested into characters. I've seen some people rank it fairly low, but I personally don't really understand why. I think it was a solid S tier, like, at the lowest. There was a few points in time when you were just kind of like, there's a few issues with this, like, kind of like when you're watching a detective show and they're like, oh, this is how the culprit did it, and you're just like, I don't think that's very plausible. There were, I think, 1 or 2 times when that had happened in the show. But yeah, it's super interesting, fantastic watch. I mean, take it from me, as someone who doesn't like a trying to fit in where you don't belong type show, you know, fake it till you make it. This show almost having that as its main focus, but being an S tier, should speak about its quality. Up next, we have Mushoku Tensei. It's not much of a challenge, you know. Every episode's fantastic. It's really invested. Unlike most isekais, the main character actually keeps his trauma from his past life. He goes into this world and it's not like, hey, you're like all powerful now, way to go, like now you can change your life. Because let's be real, if most people nowadays were to get just isekai'd into another world and given a second chance at life, I don't think it would have gone much better, because they haven't changed at all. All that's changed is their surroundings. Them as a person is still the same person. And Mushoku Tensei almost takes that and is like, yeah, that's the reality of it, and throws that in there. It's super, the animation's really well done. I really like how the first season, there isn't any opening where it's just kind of like, the opening is taken to do world building and world building alone, which I think makes it just a fantastic show overall. I have very little bad to say about it. I know a lot of people really hate how raunchy Rudius is, and how much of a pervert he is, but it's kind of like, that's who he was in his past life, so that's not going to change. And it's very fun to see him slowly change over time, because he seems to almost at the beginning be pure raunch, but the further on you go, he kind of like starts to respect other people, and it's very interesting to see that character development. Up next we have, I think it's called A Whisker Away. Yeah, A Whisker Away. This one's a movie. I believe you can watch it on Netflix if they haven't taken it off. It was not the best movie. I'd say it was probably a bit below average. There was some interesting premises that happen in it, like the world building done whenever they go in like into the almost other world. I'm not sure what exactly it would be called, but it heavily revolves around cats, believe it or not. I think one of the characters can actually turn into a cat, which leads to some interesting things where like she goes and, I think it's the girl that can turn into a cat, but like she goes and basically hangs out with her crush as a cat because her crush likes cats as well. Weird, I think, a little bit, but you know, it wasn't an awful watch. Up next we have I think it's like the 7 Special Sword Blades, Reign of the 7 Spell Blades. This one, the animation of it went really hard, I think, the first few episodes. There was a few points in the show where it was kind of like, ooh, that feels either forced or a bit weird. Like there's an entire episode that, or I guess an entire arc that seems to revolve around like kind of saving the animals or magical monsters. Almost feels like it was sponsored by PETA. And at that point in time, it was kind of very hard to get through. I'd say it was probably below average, especially since like as soon as the show actually started to take off and get really good, they had like one episode where they pulled all the stops in story, character, you know. You find out who the main character really is and you're just like, oh snap, like this is good, I'm invested. Like they end the show on this kind of almost like mic drop moment that really brings you into the show. And the very next episode they're like, all right, back to slice of life. It's like, dude, you had it there, you had it. Like you could have done something with that, but then the character that like you brought everyone's attention to is just like not even the focus anymore the very next episode. Actually, now that I'm remembering that moment, we're putting in D tier. I'm kind of pissed off about that still. All right, why the heck are you here, teacher? Another one that really seems to like to push the boundaries between hentai and anime. It's all shorts and teacher-student relationships, especially having wanting, for a time I wanted to be a teacher, and having watched it, I was like, oh, this is rough. This is, oh wow, ugh. But yeah, so I'd probably put that in D tier. Oh gosh. Alright, up next we have Nekopara. We have actually a fun meme about Nekopara. Let's look this up. We'll bring that over here. But yeah, this is probably one of my all-time favorite memes, just because I think it perfectly emulates the community that exists within a lot of platforms and everything. But yeah, so we're gonna... Alright, I got it. Right here. We'll go ahead and pause it, full screen that, turn on the volume. Fantastic show. Not show, I mean meme. Fantastic meme. The show itself was very below average, I think. It's another one of those CGDCT, and as you saw, there's definitely some ecchi that happens into it, you know, and they're underage, so we can't rank that too high. We're actually we're gonna bring that down to D tier, because we don't want the FBI raiding this house. But yeah, alright, onto I forgot how bad that was. Alright, next up, we have, the recovery of an MMO junkie. This one was a interesting watch in the sense that I didn't know you could botch your romance this much. Very painful to watch. Honestly, there's nothing memorable about it the entire time you're watching it. You're not wanting to drop the show because it's, bad and, like, absolute garbage. You just want to drop the show because you're, like, not gonna get anything from it. It's like so mid that you almost hate it because it's too mid. But yeah, so that one, FF tier. Pretty rough, I think. Every plot point that it brings up is predictable. You know, a lot of the tropes they have aren't entertaining at all. But yeah, up next we have, I think this is the Bridge of Summer. Into like the tunnel, the Bridge of Summer. The Tunnel to Summer, the Exit of Goodbyes. Interesting watch. I really like the premise of it. The characters. I decided to watch it whenever I actually had a friend who wanted me to watch a musical, or I guess kind of a musical. It's called Musica, which was actually like one of the few kind of music themed movies where people seem to like dance, that I was actually like, oh, this is really interesting and good. It's a comedy musical, which worked really well in its favor. The way they portray things was really interesting. Musica, probably one of the better live action films I've seen. But she really wanted me to watch that, and I was like, all right, I'm watching it today. Today's the day I watch it. And then I was on Reddit, and I was on a anime meme page, and a clip from this show came up, and I was like, oh shoot. Basically, one girl completely slaps another girl across the face, and when you see something like that, you can't not watch the movie. So I texted my friend, and I was like, all right, I apologize. I have more important things to do with my time than watch your recommendation. But yeah, there was a lot of points in time when I did get invested into it. There were a few points in time that I thought was unrealistic. The ending, the girl like still loves the dude after X amount of years, which was kind of shocking to me. I didn't think that that was something that made sense at all. Like, hey, this person, you abandoned her and you expect her to love you for like X amount of years, and then she still does. And I didn't find that too believable. I texted my friend, the one that recommended Musica to me. She told me that it is plausible, that she thinks that some people would probably take like up to 10 years to drop their first crush, which was, wow, if that's actually the case, holy crap, that's unexpected. But yeah, up next we have the Sacrifice. I can't remember what it's actually called, what the full title of it is in English, but it's like no, that's the song that I'm thinking of. The Sacrificial Princess and the King of Beasts. This one was actually a really good watch. It has a very soft animation style, kind of like Studio Ghibli, but more on the damper mood type. Almost like a storybook, I think, is probably a better way to describe it in terms of animation. Really interesting premise. It's kind of a prejudice against certain groups of people. You have the one side of the wall who hates the other side of the wall. The people who hate the beasts and the beasts who hate the people, and it's kind of like the process of them getting along by the King of Beasts taking in the princess who he was supposed to kill. But yeah, super interesting story. I really liked the main girl in the show. She was very sweet and wholesome. It was very hard to like watch her do something and be like, ah, you stupid idiot, you done ruined everything. Even whenever she did something that was kind of like, oh, that was not the smartest of choices, you're kind of like, you can understand where she's coming from when she does it. But yeah, overall, fantastic show. In terms of story, it kind of does have a slow pacing to it at certain points in time, which makes it a bit harder to watch. So I think that's why it's probably going to be an S tier instead of SS tier, where I probably would have put it had they, whenever necessary, brought up kind of the plot a little bit more. Yeah, overall, fantastic show. Up next, we have, oh boy, this one, it's like a Netorare or something like that. Basically a show about cheating on your significant other. And that was that's an FF tier right there. That's that was a rough one. There's a lot of really like bizarre points in the show. You're just kind of like, I don't think I really enjoy that one all that much. Up next, we have New Game. New Game is a fun one because it's a girl who joins a game-making company, and is like, yo, I want to make a game. And they make a game. It was interesting to kind of watch that. I'm not sure how accurate that is to actually making a game or anything like that, but I think it was a fun watch, especially since it was on the earlier ends of when I started watching anime. So we're probably going to stick that in A tier. I don't know if I ever got super invested into it, and there are a few canny shots throughout it that kind of just didn't really feel like they belonged there, or they put the focus on that too much whenever I thought that it'd be more interesting to put the focus on something else. But yeah, it's a CGD CT, but it was interesting to watch. Now we have Nichijou. This one, I'd say probably solid SS tier. There's a few clips that aren't that I didn't fully get invested in, but it's a lot of just really random what the heck moments. In terms of comedy, it's definitely one of the better ones out there. It's a definite would recommend. If you've ever seen the dude fighting a deer, the principal fighting the deer and like doing a German suplex on it, then this is where it comes from. Nichijou. Alright, next up, You Never Thought There Was a Girl Online, or something like that. FF tier. Terrible. The main character was highly unlikable, basically falls in love with the dude and is like, oh my gosh, I'm so in love with you that I'm going to devote my entire life to loving you, and it's going to be incredibly cringy because I'm going to be doing things that you aren't going to like and nobody around you is going to like. It was a rough one. I don't know why the main guy would even stay with her, and the entire premise of it is, hey, they're all gamers, and plot twist, some of the gamers that are in their clan are actually girls, and whoa, crazy. Because they never thought there was going to be a girl online. Up next, we have Welcome to the NHK. This one, it's dark. Don't watch it if you're not in the mood to, like, feel depressed, is probably the best way to put it. If you're down to have be in a bad mood, this is a good show to watch. It's a solid show though, very easy to get into. It's all about a NEET. What does NEET stand for again? It's like a not in employment, whatever, not in employment, education, or training is what it's called. That's what NEET stands for. So basically a jobless bum who lives in a house, who still has a home, basically. But yeah, this follows kind of one of those people. It's dark. It's definitely on a more somber mood because the main character is a NEET, and whenever you do that, it goes into like how one becomes a NEET, kind of the thought process of what happens with a NEET. And there's a lot of points in the show where you're just like, oh wow, that's actually like really dark and kind of messed up, but it's still kind of it just flows really nicely with the show, and it kind of gives you a perspective in life that I don't think a ton of people have actually experienced. And I think it's a very good watch for that reason. Definitely would recommend. Up next, we have Nanan Byori. The first poster I ever got was to Nanan Byori. It's a fantastic show. Comedy. It's a CGDCT with a comedy. But I definitely really liked it because I grew up in a small town, and a lot of the humor that happens in it is very much like small town-esque humor. I'm probably going to put it in SSS tier. There are some points where like the pacing of the show just feels kind of weird, but I think that almost adds to the comedy in a lot of aspects. Like the opening scene is, I think it's like a solid 2 or 3 minutes of just scrolling through countryside scenery with the background music of a first grader playing the recorder. So it's like fantastic show. If you've ever seen the Nyan Pasu, or there's actually a song that was made about like the main girl. I think it's like, I don't remember her name. It's like Remy-chan or something like that. I think I may be thinking of Oregaru though when I say that. But yeah, this was solid watch, SSS tier, great comedy, overall fantastic show. Yeah, up next we have this is like a something ninja. I don't remember exactly what it's called. It's like a ninja girl and samurai. Here we are. Yeah, Ninja Girl and Samurai Master. This is kind of goes into the history of Japan during the, I don't know what period in time, but it was with, I think, Nobuganda. I probably butchered that name, but it kind of goes into the history of Japan and the like unification of all the different clans in Japan. So it's kind of almost an educational comedy, which it was very interesting to watch. Definitely helped me throughout my Japan culture class. I'd say probably S tier. I do think it kind of belongs a little bit higher on there, though the comedy does take away from it, but it's a great piece of educational. It's almost like watching a video essay that's like comedy, very comedic. Alright, up next we have Nisekoi. This one, it was okay at first, and then it kind of turned into a harem, which made it drop a few points, and then all of a sudden you find out, oh, the childhood friend has a locket and he has a key to the locket or something like that. But then plot twist, so do the other girls, and at that point all believability went out the window. Show just kind of turned to crap for me. I'm honestly going to put it in C tier. A lot of people really enjoyed it. I had a friend who really enjoyed it. Makes no sense to me. It wasn't that good. It's below average at best. Alright, up next we have another farming one, I think. If I remember correctly, I think this is the Farming in Another World with, or I guess I maxed out my farming and became overpowered, or something along those lines. Here we go. I've somehow gotten stronger when I improved my farm-related skills. The first episode, very funny, because, you know, dude throws a carrot at a dragon and the dragon explodes. That was a funny moment to watch because of the absurdism. One of those few points in time when I think absurdism actually was entertaining. But then it got annoying because he got a harem and because the comedy was just played way too far into it. So yeah, we're gonna put that in D tier, below average. Up next, we have something about being betrayed and joining a group of other betrayed adventurers. That's probably the worst way to put it, but yeah. It's like, adventurers who don't believe in humanity will save the world. It was a mediocre watch at best. That's the best way to put it. Mediocre at best. You know, it's a almost like an isekai that didn't know it was an isekai. But basically, people don't believe in humanity, and they're like, "Ah, people suck. Wait a second, we all think each other suck. Hey, want to form a party?" And that they just go on with life like that. All right, next up we have Noragami. Personally, I hated it. I didn't like it. It felt too slow, and one of the main characters, well, I guess neither of them were all that entertaining to me, especially the girl. The girl was honestly one of those people who's like, it's so sweet that she felt like she was too self-sacrificing, and to the point where it just wasn't good. But yeah, personally, I didn't have pain watching it. It wasn't like so hard to get through that I felt pain, but I do think it was a D tier show, which I don't know, give me flack for that one if you want to. Up next, we have My Wife is a Student Council President. This one starts off weird and turns out to be another one of those ones that pushes boundaries between anime and hentai. You know, it's very similar to Love Ru. In terms of shows, it was painful to get through, despite being a short. I think that honestly, for this series, made it even more painful, because then it was like hey, instead of actually focusing on like plot development, let's have a mini story where you see boobs. And yeah, not that entertaining. Up next, we have Noblesse. Noblesse was really good, I think, later on, but it definitely seemed to be one of those shows where the author had a vision in their mind and was attempting to put it down on paper, but because like it was so defined in their mind, they didn't really put that down on the paper or really describe it all too well. Almost like they were familiar with it, and so they expected other people to be familiar with it as well. I'm not sure if the anime cut out any of like the manhwa, because if I remember correctly, it's a webtoon original. But yeah, throughout just the very introduction of it, you can already tell that there's a really well thought out world. It's just there's not a very good introduction into that world. For that reason, I'm probably going to put it above average because you can tell it's there. But yeah. Up next, we have Spice and Wolf, a fantastic show about economics and Wolf Girl. It's overall, I really enjoyed the show. It was very interesting. I really like the main girl as well as the main dude. It is kind of similar to, it is a romance to a degree, but it never really feels like the romance needed to progress really quickly, whereas a lot of other romance shows, it kind of feels like because it's the main plot of the show, like it has to progress, but it just never does. In this one, it never really seems to fall into that category. But yeah, if you ever want to learn about like economics and as well as like, I guess currency trading and some of those things, and like inflation, manipulating stock markets, all those different types of things, this is a great show for that. The characters are likable as well. I know a newer one is coming out right now, but I watched this fairly recently, so I haven't like, the original is too fresh on my mind to start the old one. But yeah, in terms of show, easily SS tier. Yeah, I'd say SS tier. There's a few points in time where it kind of is like, it doesn't ever get bad, but it just, you're not as into the story as you were at other points. It doesn't always completely maintain the momentum it first starts off with. But yeah, up next, we have, I don't remember this one off the image. Oh, The Unwanted Undead Adventurer. It's somehow a harem without being a harem. Kind of almost an isekai without being an isekai type show, C tier. Basically, dude dies, becomes a skeleton, and finds out that he can level up faster as a skeleton than he can as a human. And so he meets a bunch of girls, saves them, they fall in love with him, and then you never see them again. They're gone. Alright. Oji-san to Marshmallow. I think it's Old Man and Marshmallow's the... Oh, I guess it's just called Oji-san and Marshmallow in English as well. This one, it's a short about a dude who loves to eat marshmallows. In terms of shorts, it's on the better end of shorts. I probably wouldn't say it's good. It's above average, I'd say, because it does seem a bit slow, and the comedy of it is very much just like, this man loves marshmallows, so it gets old fairly quickly, but never like so old that it kind of drops a ton. But yeah, it was an interesting watch. I think the episodes are only like 3 minutes long, so very quick watch as well. Orange. I'm gonna be honest, I know that there's like a time travel and that there's like regret and everything, and I remember watching it and really being like, dang, that's sad, and kind of has a sad ending, but I like that. But I don't remember it enough to actually rank it. I think based off of what I remember, I'd probably put it in S tier, but I don't remember it well enough to actually stick it in there. But they do have one good song in the show. Up next, we have the hidden dungeon only I can enter. I believe that's what this one is, yeah? Yeah, alright. This one is ecchi on ecchi. Not my type of show at all. The main dude basically finds a dungeon and only he can enter it, and so he's like, ah, sweet, it's a hidden dungeon only I can enter. And he gains powers from the dungeon to become more powerful, and get this, in order for him to become even more powerful, if he has a lucky lecher moment, he gets even more powerful. So it's like, hot diggity dang, and he gains a skill or something along those lines, which allows him to be even more of a lucky lecher, which, wow, fantastic, ecchi, woohoo, can't wait to see more penny shots. Actually, F tier, yay, let's go. Next, I don't remember this one. Is this... Oh, it's Showman's Sample. Ah, this one is another harem where basically a bunch of rich girls go to a school, and it's like a girls only school, but the educators are like, wait, we need to like prepare these people for the real world, because this is the rich school, so pish posh that they're out of reality. They have no concept of what actually happens in the real world. They're too sheltered. So they decide that they need to get a person, specifically a guy, to basically become what is known as the Showman's Sample, the average person's sample, so that they can have an idea of what the outside world is like. It was painful to get through, F tier. I don't think there were very many likable characters, and then there's a little girl, kind of this one right here with the blue hair, who decides to strip anytime she thinks, which, why? That didn't need to be there. But yeah, that was a somewhat painful one to get through. Alright, up next we have Sweet Reincarnation. This one, a confectioner dies and gets reincarnated into another world. Shocker, I know, that's never been done before, dying and being born into another world. Crazy. Basically his life passion is making sweets. He dies, goes to another world, and he's like, huh, my passion in life is making sweets. And so that's what he does. He makes sweets in this other life, and it's at a below average isekai, D tier. Up next, we have Osamake, the rom-com where the childhood friend won't lose. I do believe that we are going to create a new category. Or, oh, whoops, that was above, add a row below. Let's see, delete row. Burnable trash. I've mentioned this in the past streams before, but I actually wrote an essay all about how this show sucks, about how it's one of the worst shows in existence. You know, you can't get much worse than this one. And surprisingly, the college essay did kind of well. Turns out when you write what you're passionate about, it does a little bit better. Alright, but yeah, garbage show. At no point in time was I like, oh, this is good. The entire time I was watching it, I was like, holy crap, this is literally going to destroy my mind. I am breaking on the inside, dying, suffering, every other word that relates to those words. at no point in time while this was happening and while I was watching it, I was like, ah, solid. It was entertaining. There's this one plot point where, in order to win the love of this one person, he dances on stage, and you can really tell that the with the camera work that they don't know how to do like a good dance, because they were going like shots from all different angles of the dude like doing jazz hands, and that was like part of the dance routine as he was doing a cringy dance on stage for love. It was like a major sign of affection. I think it's like a grand display of affection. A lot of movies, American like rom-com movies, will do it where the two characters kind of fall apart, and then in order to get the girl to fall in love with the guy again, the guy will do some sort of grand display of affection. I think I don't know what movies, but like sometimes that's like getting the marching band to play a song for you as you sing to her or something like that. I guess if you want to go in terms of The Office, in The Office, whenever Andy decides to call up all his friends and start singing the Take a Chance on Me song to Angela, this is just kind of trashy. This show does it. Dude wasn't even a good grand display of affection. Don't remember how it turned out. Honestly, don't care. I'm hoping that someday this show can end up in this category so that I won't have to remember the garbage that was this, the complete and utter donkey doogie on fire. But yeah, terrible show. Would not recommend to my worst enemy, because not even my worst enemy deserves to suffer that much. I honestly feel bad for my teacher because she had to read an essay about the show, and anything relating to this show can only be an FFF tier at best. Next up, my love story. This was very sweet and wholesome. I quite liked this show. There's a really funny moments that happen in the show. It was very good. My friend basically pushed really hard because he's also a fan of romance anime, and he pushed really hard for me to watch the show because he thought it was wholesome and cute. And yeah, there's a lot of really funny moments in the show. Basically, it's great because the main character is like, no one loves me, but I'm okay with that. Everyone falls in love with my best friend, but it's okay because I support my best friend. And he's basically like the most genuinely nicest guy you'll ever meet. The girl is super sweet, falls in love with this dude, and this dude's like, oh, she wants to hang out with us more. It's for my guy friend. And it's like, it definitely has that. It takes a long time for those two to get together, but then once you do, you're like, ah, this is very sweet and wholesome, and you just like the entire show overall. It's like two wholesome people being wholesome together. Very cute, very fantastic, great show. Would recommend. Yeah, up next we have Solo Leveling. This one is a very popular web manga, mostly for the art style. In terms of story, let's be honest, it's just an isekai without being an isekai. It's a power level fantasy. The only thing that really makes it stand out was the art style, and I don't think the animation really matched up to it all that much. But yeah, it was, honestly, I'm gonna put it slightly below average. I know a lot of people loved it, but to me it just wasn't really that. It was another average isekai-esque show. Alright, up next is One Punch Man. Now this is a power leveling fantasy I can get behind. I actually don't remember the dude who did, but it was a comedian who went on stage and actually talked about the show, how interesting it was between like, how it kind of took the characters, and the characters represent different aspects of Japanese society, which is super interesting to watch. But yeah, the main character is super good. I don't have much bad to say at the show. I'm gonna put it in SS tier. You know, the main character is so strong that he's actually bored. Every fight he gets in, he's kind of bored. He has no motivation for it whatsoever. Honestly, fantastic show. Would recommend. Not to mention the opening is solid. Alright, Life is Tough for Otomote Mobs. I think that's what this one is called. Believe it or not, it's another isekai. He gets isekai'd into an Otomote game. And guess what? He has a hard life there. It's basically a fantasy world where they kind of flip-flopped the male and female roles that like a lot of people believe there are nowadays in society, where like, hey, like the men are now oppressed instead of the women. Let's flip-flop it. But they also like brought it to really large extremes where it's like the guys are basically complete and utter trash. Like we're talking pre right to vote for women, like worse than that. Like the men might as well be slaves in this to some degree. They're basically like slaves without the title of a slave. But yeah, the overall premise of the show was weird. Wasn't a huge, fantastic watch. The only entertaining part about it was the main guy was like, yeah, screw everyone. I'm gonna do my own thing and be an a-hole about it. That was an entertaining to watch. Other than that, average isekai. Up next, we have Love is Like a Cocktail. If you want to learn how to make drinks to get drunk, this is the show for you. They have a lot of recipes in here. Not all of them are alcoholic too, so even if you're a non-alcoholic, I think there's like 2 or 3 recipes in here for you. But yeah, very wholesome. Entertaining how the main guy basically solves all of the problems. Basically, it's a husband and wife. The wife comes home and is like, man, life was tough at work today. And the dude's like, dang, that sounds rough. You want some alcohol? And he makes her alcohol. Very wholesome, despite the fact that the dude almost seems to be solving all of his problems by getting his wife drunk. But yeah, in terms of show, I would say probably A tier. It's a short, so it's very hard to get invested in. But once again, if you want some recipes, by all means, that's where to find them. Next, we have All Routes Lead to Doom, another villainess story. This one's like I said before, the villainess stories, they're very entertaining in the sense that all of their ideas are new. They're not yet exhausted like they have been done in the isekai genre. And for that reason, this one definitely goes higher. It is a harem, reverse harem. But it's like everyone that falls in love with her is honestly more funny than anything else. I'm not sure if that's what other harems try to do, like make it funny that everyone is falling in love with the character, but a lot of times it feels like it fails. In this one, it didn't. We're gonna put that in S tier, just because, you know, there's a few points in time where you do get pretty into the show. Next, we have the Ranking of Kings. This one starts off really interesting, really good. You know, like most shonen-esque shows, whenever you are watching it, the main character definitely has plot armor, and you kind of feel that in the show as you're watching it. But it's like, it never feels like the type of show that would like actually kind of ruin the premise of the show for plot armor or anything like that. Because it's like, I guess the best way to put it, it's the kind of show where you expect it to kind of get dark at some point in time, because it is kind of messed up. It's the main character is very deaf, and it's basically his struggles throughout life as he's deaf, because he's trying to become a king, but he can't communicate with people very well because he can't really talk or anything. But yeah, in this one, it's very good in that aspect. Starts off really well, but then later on, as you go through the story, it's like they try to make it as dark as possible while making it still a kid show, I think is the best way to put it, because it seems like almost everyone has plot armor at some point in time, where all of the characters just, you know, they're on the verge of death and then somehow live. Like multiple times throughout the show, you're watching it and a character is on the ground bleeding out. You know, they fought to the bitter end type of bleeding out, where they have like a sword through their body, and then you're like, ah, finally a character is gonna die, and then all of a sudden a healer comes and heals them. But wait, the healer runs out of magic, so the next person that she finds that's all hurt can't be healed. But wait, she has a bunch of like stamina packs and that she's just gonna drink, and that brings back her magic. But wait, those run out. But wait, they get her more. So it's like, at no point in time does a character really seem to die. I think like one person throughout the entire show actually dies, and by that point in time, you're just like, great, finally one character died. Why aren't all the others dead? But yeah, honestly, probably slightly above average. That really ruined the show for me. I really like character deaths. So whenever shows like either bring characters back from the dead or just refuse to kill off characters, it's hard to get into it. Which is honestly part of the reason why I struggled with One Piece for the first little bit, was just because like all the Marines would get just cut down by swords, and then at some point in time, they'd all just wake up and be like, ah, man, crazy how we passed out there. Yeah, up next, we have, I think it's like the Royal Tutor. Yeah, the Royal Tutor. Basically a semi-hot man teaches a bunch of other hot guys. And when I say hot guys, I mean they're pretty hot. This is definitely meant for the female gaze, for the female audience. But yeah, fantastic. In terms of premise, it's a pretty good show. You know, it's another one of those ones where, like, where did the teacher come from? Who is the teacher really? Similar to Assassination Classroom. Not as well done as Assassination Classroom, but still pretty good. in terms of show, I do think it was good. I never got super invested into it, but it was good enough to make it to A tier. Up next, we have... I don't remember this one. Well, I mean, I remember it. I just don't remember what it's called. Here we go. Oreshura. This one was entertaining to a degree. It's another harem though, which once again, that's kind of hard to get into. Probably a C tier. I think there's an incest is wincest moment in there. And I don't know, the main girl was somewhat entertaining to watch, but yeah, other than that, not super great. Overlord. A fantastic show about a guy losing his humanity as he tries to become a ruler of the world. Honestly, probably one of the better animes out there. I'd rank it a solid 9 out of 10 in terms of shows. Very, very solid watch. At no point in time during the show was I like, man, this is boring. I'm gonna be honest though, I don't like Albedo. A lot of people really like her. I don't. She's not that cool of a character. It's just the entire like, oh, I'm like super raunchy, but they don't know that I'm actually like wholesome. But yeah, not a huge fan of that part. But yeah, I'd probably put it in S tier. Very fun to watch the main guy just kind of lose his humanity and try to take over the world. Up next, we have The Angel Next Door. Wow. Starting to get used to the terrible flavor of the drink. Up next, we have The Angel Next Door Spoils Me Rotten. I rank this show probably a... In all honesty, it's a romance. But in terms of romance, it really falls off in the sense that the girl and the guy like agree they're not going to fall in love with each other. And so they hang out together and fall in love together. But like the whole spoils me rotten moment, it's supposed to be seen as like a really sweet relationship that they have, but they push it so hard that it just kind of falls off almost. It just doesn't get as good or stay as good. It really just at some point in time kind of drops off because there's only so much you can take. Like it's like eating a cake where one slice is enough to kind of get you to say, all right, my sweet tooth is satisfied. But yeah, it just got old pretty quickly. Pop Team Epic. I'm gonna be honest, FF tier. I don't know how I managed to finish even one season of that. It's basically garbage. Complete garbage. You know, every joke is definitely referential, so if you don't get the references, it's not going to be as good. But even when you do get the references, it just feels like it's referencing too much, almost like how Scary Movie referenced so much to the point where like kind of became an almost bad movie while still being somewhat funny. That's kind of what what Pop Team Epic falls into for me. Yeah, actually, Burnable Trash, I don't think that's a good enough name. Irredeemable. Garbage, there we go. Irredeemable Garbage. Alright, up next, we have Platinum End, made by the same guy who made the oh-so-famous Death Note. This show is a bunch of people decide that they are going to de-alive themselves, and in order to... and then they basically fall through. Then, plot twist, angels save them and say, hey, seems like you have an issue with this world if you want to de-alive yourself, so what if you try and fix it by becoming God, because our God wants to retire. So it's basically a death game to try and get, you know, this one person to become God. They decide, it tries to be like a very deep and introspective about like what's wrong with the world and everything type show. It kind of turns out that way, but the main character is just like a wuss. So it's very hard to watch him like in a death game, basically be scared of a death game for 12 episodes. And once you finally get to the, or I think it might have actually been 24, then once you get to the end, they decide to, spoiler alert, I'm going to spoil the show, they decide what they're going to do is kill off every character. And what I mean by every character, I mean every single character, like background character, any character that you've ever seen is gonna die. They're basically going to erase the world, as well as the heavens, as well as hell, if you want to say that exists or not in this show. Not sure if it does or not, but basically everything goes. all their souls, everything's gone. You're left with a blank slate, screen turns black. And it seemed like what they were trying to do was say, hey, like, you didn't know that this is what was really happening behind the scenes. It kind of like tried to do a plot twist where you have these characters, they're all dead now, and then like two characters are talking to each other before they die, and they're like, dang, good job. And the other person is like, yep, I won. And it's like, I guess I kind of see, like, is it like these two characters are supposed to be like God and Satan, God and the devil? Like, it seemed to, but the execution of that was done so poorly that I can't even say that with confidence that that's what it was trying to do at the end there. And for that reason, we're probably going to put it in probably F tier. It was fairly hard to get through. There were a lot of points of time when it was just painful to watch this wuss, like, not want to kill someone, but then have everyone else basically screaming at him, what are you doing, you fool? Kill him! Kill him! Without him ever killing him. But yeah. Up next, we have this show, which I don't know based off of the picture. Which is unfortunate, because that means I have to find it. I think it's down. It's not Outbreak Company. Crap. Plastic Memories. Honestly, I'm a sucker for show with sad endings. I am, I'll admit it. It has a damper mood, the entire thing. I'm kind of into that, you know. I like feeling sad. This show does a very good job at making me feel sad. My friend watched it. He only saw one episode and he's like, it's 10 out of 10, but I'm not going to finish this because I know what's going to happen and I don't want it to happen. But yeah, honestly, fantastic show. Probably not SSS. I think there was one point in time when I was like, oh, that's actually, I think, nah, it's SSS. There's one point in time in the show where it just got really dark, but it seemed to almost fit the show and kind of give perspective on the show and everything. It worked well for what the show was. For that, we're putting in SSS tier. I really liked it. I know it's not everyone's cup of tea to have like a show like Your Lie in April, where it just kind of like the entire time you can tell that it's just leaning more and more into this one sad moment. But yeah, overall, I really enjoyed the show. All right, up next, Plastic Nason. This one is another short. I think to watch the entire thing is 45 minutes. Just a bunch of really random moments. In terms of comedy, it's not the best. I'd rank it probably slightly above average. There's a few moments in the show when you're watching it and you're like, this is a hat on a hat moment, absurdity on absurdity, which just kind of breaks the humor. But you know, there's in some of the absurdities, they're very entertaining. Up next, we have Outbreak Company. This one was an interesting one. Basically, Japan tries to set up diplomats with another world. Another fantasy world. So he sends... Basically, they're trying to introduce their culture there by sending like a bunch of manga. So they send a dude who's obsessed with manga and anime and stuff to another world, which I think makes it kind of a self-insert show, just in that sense that the only people who are probably really going to watch this are people who are really into anime and manga. So it's kind of like the perfect self-insert show in that sense. But yeah, honestly, it was slightly above average, but it wasn't isekai to a degree. So for that, we're putting in C tier, because I don't think isekais really belong above C tier unless they manage to really break out of the tropes. All right, Recreators. This show has probably one of my favorite villains, the girl with purple hair. As a villain, I think she's such a great villain. She has like no emotion. Everything she's doing is done for the motivation of her having fun. And that's like, I think the best way to put it is that one character, Harley Quinn, but done better to a degree, because Harley Quinn's just kind of crazy almost, and it's like her motivation is that she's crazy, whereas in this one, like, the character doesn't seem crazy. She seems perfectly sane, but is wanting to have fun, and her idea of fun is what breaks the norm. Yeah, one of my favorite villains. Such an interesting premise. There's a lot of points in the show where you're like, oh shoot, like, I didn't think about that. The entire premise of the show is a bunch of people from other worlds, other stories that people have written in the book. Like, like authors in the story in the anime, all the authors, their characters are coming to life and basically they split into two factions. There's the faction that wants to go back to their original works, like go back into their worlds and basically become a part of the story, and then there's the faction who wants the authors to basically rewrite their story to get rid of the hardships that they have. And it was such an interesting premise, especially with the Magic Girl, because Magic Girl I'm not going to spoil it, but like the entire arc with the Magic Girl was just really well done. I'm probably going to put it in S tier because I really like the show. Actually, SS tier, because throughout most of the show it's very bingeable, and I think just overall a fantastic watch, which I don't hear a lot of people talking about it. I think most often I just hear it mentioned in passing, but I do believe it deserves a little bit more attention than what it's been given. Maybe it's because it's a reverse isekai, and that's a type of isekai, which if that's the case, I understand. Yeah, up next, another one where I don't recognize it from the... Oh wait, no, is this a... Crap, what's it called? The one High School Host Club, Orem High School Host Club. Let's see. This show, one of the first shows I ever watched. My first introduction to a harem/reverse harem. I think I watched this one after watching Black Butler and Death Note. So it was like the, I want to say, 5th show I ever watched. And I don't think it was very good, especially for a 5th watch. It definitely is geared towards a specific audience, like the specific female audience that likes watching two hot guys get together. But yeah, my friend recommended to me, said she wasn't going to hang out with me until I watched it, and I was like, wow, okay, I guess I can. So I finished it, and yeah, I told her it wasn't good. I'd probably rank it slightly below average. I don't think it was bad enough to really put anything below that, but I don't think it was really good. Prison School. I don't like the type of humor in this show. It's all very raunchy, poop joke, 8th grade, ha ha ha, look at that person. He just saw that girl take a piss and now she wants to see him take a piss. Haha, very unrealistic in a lot of the comedy, and the ecchi aspects of it just weren't very good. Honestly, it was a bit of a pain for me to get through, so I ranked that as an F tier, despite the fact that so many people rate it highly. Not sure why they do, but they do. Up next, we have Ping Pong, the animation. Fantastic show. The animation style is definitely a bit hard to get. Like, it's almost an acquired taste whenever you first get into it. But the animation style it seems to be very fitting for what the show is, and the director, the way he directed the film. The animation fits with it very well. In terms of, like, plot and everything, it's one of the few actual sports animes that I watched and was like, oh dang, this is actually really good and interesting. I'm actually invested in whether or not this character wins. This is one of those few shows that actually got me to the point where I was invested in it. Honestly, probably an SS tier. There are a few points in time where the show almost seemed to... The style that this show was made in seemed to not do the show a favor. Kind of went against the story, against the grains of like how the story flows. Like throughout most of the show, don't get me wrong, the animation like works with it almost flawlessly. And then there's like 2 or 3 moments in the show where it's like, I don't know if it just really works here. But yeah, there's side characters. I love the there's some side characters where it goes off on those side characters just as like a kind of almost comedy outlet. You know, like it's a very intense throughout the entire show, and so they have this one side character who's kind of the comedic relief of the show, but like not done in a way where it seems to break the show. More like it's like more funny to watch this person than anything else. Like he's an entertaining person to watch than he is attempting to be funny. Yeah, up next, I think this is the quitting heroine to live a relaxing life or something like that. Oh no, Princess Principal. Alright, this is one of the first shows I ever watched on High Dive. I got a High Dive subscription to watch one show that was supposedly really good, and I watched it and I was like, average. Then I was like, well, I have this subscription now. I have it for 1 month. I might as well watch as much as I can on High Dive to watch it. I still have High Dive. I ended up paying for it because they always have like one banger a season. But this one was one of the ones that was recommended on it. It's a espionage special force-esque anime, which I think was done really well. It kind of takes place in a steampunk world, which steampunk tends to be hit or miss for me. It's kind of like a fantasy world where you can do really well with it, but you can also just go off the deep end, get too far into the like mechanics of it, or lose the mechanics of it too much for it to. It's very hard to strike that balance, the balance inside of a steampunk world. But I think this one did that pretty well. And yeah, overall, I'd say it was probably an S tier show. I don't know if I could give it much higher than that, just because there's a few points in the show where it's like, it's a bit tropey, but I can get over that. Up next, we have something about potions. That's about all I remember from the name. Some sort of potion show. It's made by Funa. F-U-N-A, I think is the name. The same person that made a lot of the... You can kind of tell their works. I think it was like the... Didn't I say make my abilities average in the next life, and like saving 800,000 gold in another world? Or something along those lines. But you can typically tell, honestly, more often than not, they're average isekais. Same with Remonster. Remonster was an average isekai. The entire premise, they go like a day-by-day thing that happens in Remonster, and as they go day by day, they quite literally do day by day, but so much happens that by like day 20, it's not even recognizable by what it was at the beginning. And so you just went too quickly, and it was too day one, like almost diary entry type things. It's like day one, this happened, this happened, this happened, this happened, this happened, which lead to this happening, and then this happened. Day two, this happened, this happened, this happened, this happened. And you guys are probably getting bored just watching me say that. And now imagine watching an entire show of that. That's basically what you get with Remonster. Oh, that went down my lungs. It burns like acid. Alright, next up, the Chivalry of... Wow. Am I even saying that right? I don't know. The something of a failed knight. The show was I think one of the first introductions to a specifically harem, because the Orem High School Host Club was the introduction into harems in general. This was the female harem. And I think from the get-go I realized, wow, I actually don't like these shows. The tsundere either was also how I discovered that I don't find tsunderes that cool. But yeah, I think it was a bit below average, C tier. It just didn't really speak to me, you know. A lot of the main girl, just like any sort of romance that the show seemed to have, didn't feel very well done, so on and so forth. Alright, up next, No Game No Life. No Game No Life is a fantastic one, which I don't know why... Well, I do know why some people hate it. Wow, No Game No Life is all the way up here. This is way out of order. But yeah, this one, a lot of people really love it. I personally really loved it. There's a few weird moments between the brother and the sister where it's like, okay, you didn't really need to do that, but I guess you did. It's one of the few shows where it's like a show all about playing games with each other and being like all smart, outmaneuvering the other person, but actually like done well. It's one of the few times when I think it is done well. But yeah, so this is honestly probably S tier. Probably wouldn't rank it higher than S tier just because like I said, there was those few moments where you're just kind of like, you really didn't need to do that, but you did. All right. But yeah, it was a interesting part right there. Up next we have, I think this is Fruit Tart Pop Idol, if I remember correctly. Which, it's an idol anime. One of those idol animes that's so basic, it's like any other idol anime, just not done well. Yeah, for that reason we're putting in C tier, below average. Up next we have your boy Kyoming. I am so excited for season 2. This is a great show. Basically, ancient Chinese warlord, maybe not warlord, but like a leader, dies and is reincarnated into modern day Japan, where he meets a girl, and the girl's like, I want to become a famous pop singer, and the dude's like, you know what, I'll help you. Using ancient war tactics, we shall make you a like super popular idol. Honestly, SS tier. the music wasn't always on point, but it was very, the music wasn't even the focus throughout most of the story. Most of the story was on Kyoming, who's like basically using ancient warlord tactics to try and get people to like her music. It's super interesting to watch how this could be applied in a almost like music industry, like in a concert or something like that, how these tactics can be used, because it's like everything he does seems very plausible. And I think once you're watching it, you realize, oh wait, like there's actually places that do this. Like for instance, there's one where he's basically going into how to keep people to stay longer by making it to where it's harder for them to leave, by basically like making the exit hard to find. And then you think, wait, that's basically IKEA. And so it's really interesting in that regard, where it kind of like draws connections of, oh my gosh, IKEA is using ancient Chinese warlord tactics to try and get people to stay in there. But yeah, really, really interesting show to watch. Up next, we have ReZero, which is one of the like top 4 or 5 isekais in existence. It's a Groundhog Day if Groundhog Day decided to be good. It's like a Freaky Friday if Freaky... Well, no, that's not a different thing. But no, it's fantastic show. Would recommend 100%. I'd say SS tier. I think the only time when I was really brought out of the show was whenever he basically announced he was going to be Amelia's knight. And it was just really cringy, I think is the best way to put it. Like, watching him in such a desperate state was just more than anything painful to do. But yeah, I enjoyed it. It was a great show. I mean, I enjoyed it. That's why it's an SS tier. But yeah, great show overall. I really, though admittedly, I do not think that Rem is best girl. Best girl in ReZero is Ram, and I'm going to stick by that. Ram is the better of the two by all means. You know, we have the like little trying too hard to be the perfect wife girl, and then we have Ram. Ram's cool. Up next we have Relife. Relife is a isekai where you remake their life. You know, they have a redo of their high school life. Very interesting in the fact that they basically go back to high school. A little bit concerning in the fact that you're throwing adults in high school, like an adult male into high school with a bunch of high school girls and everything. Because like, what if they fall in love? That's risky. I mean, there's rules against that in the show, but it was overall a pretty good show. I'm probably going to put it in the S category. I did enjoy it a lot. There were a few points in time when I got really invested in the show. I did not like the ending though, because the ending was too happy. I don't like happy endings all that much. At least I like happy endings if they like lean into the happiness, where you don't have to do some sort of save all or basically break the magic system that exists within the world to make it a happy ending. Kind of similar to that oh, I don't remember what it's called, but it's the one where they're all in a... We might actually be able to find it. It was one of the first ones we did, if I remember correctly. It's the anime about... Crap, I can't remember what it's called, and it's making me sad. Yeah, I'm not gonna go through the entire thing, though, just to find this one show. Oh, here we go. Amagi Brilliant Park. So at the end of Amagi Brilliant Park, they basically have this moment in time when this one person's supposed to basically have this massive tragedy befall her. But then, magically, it doesn't. Why? Because magic. And I think when shows do that, it really becomes detrimental to the entertainment of a show and how good it is. Because as soon as you do something like that, it's a soft magic system. So having a soft magic system basically solve all the problems means you're solving all of the problems without a good explanation. And that's kind of what happened in Real Life at the very end. Was it was good. It was great. But then like this, they set these rules out. They say these are the rules, this is what's going to happen, you know, this is the magic system we have. Though in this, it's not necessarily magic, but done through like drugs. It's like, you're going to, this is what's going to happen, and at the very end something happens. I don't know, like the power of love, something like that, who knows, power of friendship, something like that, basically becomes a save all and happy ending. I think that's the biggest issue I take with the story, and that's why it's not any higher than SS or SSS, or I guess any higher than S tier. But yeah, next up we have, oh boy, I remember this show. I watched it fairly recently. I don't remember. It's like not the Demon Next Girl. Let's see. Here we are. Love Tyrant. There we go. Garbage show. Terrible show. Honestly, it was painful to watch. It tried too hard to be comedy. It really did. It got old. There's a whole yandere in there, and the yandere is just like, please stop. Like, we get it. You wanna kill everybody who loves your boyfriend, or your perceived boyfriend or whatever. Not that great. And the worst part about it is they all have like invincibility, so they can keep killing each other, and it'll be like, yeah, okay, yeah, it's just, why not die again? That makes sense. Alright, up next we have Revenger. Revenger is a, believe it or not, revenge story. Where a dude takes revenge. In terms of revenge, I think it was well done. There were a few points in the show where I was like, but overall, solid S tier. The ending, if I remember correctly, it wasn't that happy an ending. I actually think it was on more towards the sad end, but it was a fairly good watch at the time. In terms of bingeability, I think I watched like the first half, paused, and then watched the second half on like a week later or something like that, just because it kind of has a damper mood where I needed to take a break while watching it. But yeah, overall it was a fairly decent show. Up next, we have Science Fell in Love, So I Tried to Prove It. In this one, we have two scientists who are basically working together, a girl and a guy. The girl turns around towards the guy scientist and is like, you know, I think I'm in love with you. And the guy's like, stop, stop, stop. No, you cannot just say that. We have to prove you're in love with me. We are scientists. There is an order to this. We need the scientific method to prove this out. And so basically they go use the scientific method on a bunch of dates and everything to prove whether or not she is in love with the main guy, which very fun. It's a fantastic watch. I loved it. Season 2 though, when that came out, they did kind of abandon comedy for drama, which was an issue I have. That's why I'm putting it in A tier. I'm not going to put it any higher than that. But honestly, if they had kept with the momentum of, dang, this is like pure comedy, it probably would have ranked a bit higher. But yeah, fantastic watch, I think. Up next, we have, I think, Akashic Records of Bastard Magic Instructor. This one has probably one of my favorite explanations of a magic system inside of a show, where, like, specifically in the chants themselves, like how the chants work and everything. This is probably one of like the best I've ever seen. The actual show was kind of meh, but for the magic system, I do think it brings it up a bit above average, just because it was so not really intricately designed, but just well thought out. It does kind of have a similar Tolkien-esque magic system where, you know, you chant to cast spells and everything, but they have like their own unique twist on it, and that's what makes it really interesting, is the unique twist that they take. Up next, we have Romantic Killer. Really good comedy up until the point where they once again decided to abandon the comedy for drama. I get that like they need to have some sort of season finale, but I don't know. I don't think abandoning what the show once was in order to do that is a great way of doing it. Romantic Killer is basically a girl who very much doesn't want to fall in love, but there's a god who's trying to get her to fall in love. So they take away like all the things that she loves and is like, you don't get these until you fall in love. And so she basically goes through a bunch of the tropes. It's almost a satire on a lot of the normal harems, where this girl is like running to school, runs across this guy, bumps into him while she has toast in her mouth. Well, no, so what happens is she's running, she's late to school. Classic rom-com trope for anime, running to school, but she almost puts toast in her mouth because she's going to be late and needs to eat breakfast. And she's like, wait, hold up, no, I'll go without breakfast. I'm not falling for this trope. Runs. She gets hit by a car, and the dude steps out of the car, and the dude has a piece of toast in his mouth. And it's a fantastic comedy in just the pure satire of it. But it abandons the comedy for drama like episode 9 or so. I think if it's a 12 episode, more towards the end it does that. And as soon as you do that, it just kind of really breaks the immersion and abandons what you're watching the show for. But yeah, for that reason, we're going to put it in A tier, similar to Science Fell in Love. But yeah. Alright, this is the saving X amount of gold in another world. I don't know, the other one made by Funa that I was talking about. Isekai, basic isekai. Basically, she can jump from world to world in between our world and to the fantasy world. And believe it or not, the gold coins in the fantasy world are easier for her to acquire than millions of dollars in our world. But she can go to the fantasy world, get the gold coins, and sell them in our world to sell them to sell them in our world for lots of money. And that's how she decides to become rich. She decides she's going to collect gold in another world, save that up, come to the modern world, the Earth world, and sell it all and retire. So that's her entire plan. Basic isekai. Alright, up next we have RWBY, specifically Ice Queendom, the spin-off anime towards the actual RWBY series. Which, I love RWBY, great show. I have a shirt for RWBY because I enjoyed it a lot. Ice Queendom, though, was really, it's kind of a spin-off, so it takes place really early in the actual story of RWBY, and I think the first 2 or 3 episodes of this are basically an edited down version of more towards the beginning of the original, or I guess Ruby show. So it kind of, you can see the parallels there, but then it kind of does its own little path and diverges like a fan fiction. That's probably the best way to put it, is it's like a fan fiction of like what could have happened at some point in time during the show. And I don't know, it was good. There was definitely a few points in time when it really seemed to drag, just because they spent so long on one specific struggle that it stopped being as interesting as it could have been. But yeah, all in all, I'd say it's probably A tier. That one moment where it kind of took too long, took a really long time. For that reason, I don't think it's going to go any higher, but great show overall. Well, Ruby is a great show overall, but in terms of Ice Queendom, A tier. Up next, we have... crap, don't remember what it's called. It's a Paladin in Another World? The Faraway Paladin. If I remember correctly, it's an isekai. I don't know, it seemed to be very slow in terms of story. You know, things progressed very slowly throughout it, as well as like the entire beginning and part. I get that you needed to like meet the mentors to know who he was trained by, but it just seemed to really take a long time in his mentor stage for him to be trained, which I definitely appreciate whenever you have other shows that just kind of like completely gloss over it. It's kind of like it's refreshing to see it done the opposite way, on the opposite extreme, but it is still on the opposite extreme, which kind of made me not really enjoy it. In terms of show, I'd rank it probably slightly above average. I don't think it was bad by any means, but I wouldn't say that it was like fantastic. Alright, up next, we have Picking Up Trash in Another World, is what I think it's called. The Weakest Tamer began a journey to pick up trash. Another isekai-ish. It's first episode, solid animation. I was hooked. I was hooked the first episode because it seemed like a somber show, like it was gonna go really well. The animation done was phenomenal. There's like a moment where they do a 360 around the character as like winds blowing in their hair, and holy crap, those scenes done well are probably some of my favorite scenes ever done, are the 360 scenes where like magic and wind. But yeah, then after that they decided to make it basic isekai. Up next we have Sakike. This one is ranked as one of like, in a lot of lists, as one of the top 10 animes out there, for comedy specifically. This in terms of comedy, it was okay. There were a lot of jokes in there that I was kind of like, especially since a lot of times my mother would be right behind me looking over my shoulders as it plays, and she would be like, oh, that character really seems to like boobs, and it'd be like, oh, you're there. Oh, this is not a show I wanted my family to see me watching. But yeah, overall a meh show. I don't know if I could really say too much good about it. There are a few good comedy aspects, like the fact that he sees people and is like, can't see their skin, so he has no concept of beauty, the most beautiful girl in school just wants him to fall in love with her. That was a very funny part to watch, but I never got really super invested in the show, so I'll probably put it at A tier. Up next, we have another isekai. I think this one is a fantasy world into fantasy world. Yeah, the reincarnation of the strongest sorceress in another world. Basically, dude is super strong, so everybody in his original world is like, he's too strong, we gotta get rid of him. And then they get rid of him, and he transfers into another world, and he's like, alright, we need to not be as strong in this world, but he is still as strong in that world, because he for some reason retains his powers, but basic isekai. Next, Saint Onisan. Have you ever wondered what would happen if Jesus and Buddha decided to take a vacation together? Look no further. In Saint Onisan, you can get just that. Watch the adventures of Jesus and Buddha as they try to pay rent, do street performances, and other miscellaneous things in order to make money on their sweet vacation onto Earth. In terms of comedy, probably A tier. I definitely would, it's a fun watch just to say you've seen it. It's kind of like Akikan, where it's like such a bizarre anime that you can go up to your friends and be like, hey, I watched a show about anthropomorphic soda cans, or hey, I watched a show about Jesus and Buddha taking a vacation to Japan. It's a purely, I guess the best way to describe that is it's a fun watch for the meme. Yeah, up next, Kids on the Slope. You've heard me mention it a few times. I quite like the show. All in all, fantastic show. It's an anime. It's about jazz. Jazz music is a fantastic genre, easily the top 3 for me. I love jazz. And this is all about people. There's one point in the show, I think it was Trash Taste, where they mentioned kind of like, there's one point on the show where it's like kind of predictable, but you're still kind of like there for it. And I definitely agree with that. There's a few points in the show where it's like, you can see where it's going, but it's not bad for it. It doesn't really add or take away anything. But yeah, all in all, I'd probably put it in an S tier. Yeah, up next we have crap. Is it Sakamoto? I believe is what it's called. Great show. Basically the main villain, not villain. Well, I mean he's kind of a villain, but Sebastian from Black Butler is how the boys on Trash Taste decided to describe Sakamoto. They actually described Sebastian as Sakamoto. But yeah, it's a fantastic comedy about a dude who's just too cool for school. But he's like still in school being really studious. Like when I say too cool for school, I don't mean like that one person who thinks they're too cool for school, you know, like, oh man, when I grow up I'm gonna be a gang member, you know, throw those gang signs around and yada yada yada, die in early age with a teardrop tattooed on my face. Not like that kind of too cool for school. I'm talking like this dude is legitimately the coolest person you'll ever meet. Like you see him and you're like, hot dang, I ain't gay, but Sakamoto makes me wanna be. Like this is the level we're talking about of coolness. He is the Giga Chad of Giga Chads. Anyway, but him being the Giga Chads of Giga Chads, it's a comedy all based around that. How people are basically completely courted by this Giga Chad accidentally. You know, like they're not trying to be courted, but then this Giga Chad comes on and is like, you don't know it, but you're in love with me. And yeah, he doesn't really say much throughout the series, but it's a fantastic show. Honestly, SS tier. Up next, we have... oh, I forget the name. Hadama Inverted. This one is really interesting. In the sense that there's like a character who gravity works the opposite for them. And you're just kind of like, huh, I don't really get how that works. Because it's hard to get how that works. But yeah, all in all, it was an interesting show, interesting premise. It's another one of the, it's a dystopian world. And it's kind of interesting to watch this dystopian world and try and figure out how the dystopian world got to where it was. But it somehow did, but super interesting watch. I'd probably say S tier. There's a few points in times, I think especially towards the end, where it gets so deep into the lore that it almost forgets that you're supposed to be presenting it in a manner that people can watch. But it was a great watch. It's just a movie, so if you have like an hour and a half to 2 hours to watch it, I don't think it's a bad pastime. As far as movie goes, I don't think it's like one of the better ones I've seen, but yeah, it's definitely up there on shows though. Or actually, no. Would I put it next to Kids on the Slope? I think we need to move Kids on the Slope up one. This is just too good an anime. Up next, we have Cromartie High School. This is one of the most bizarre shows you'll ever watch. First show's like Pop Team Epic, complete just crap, you know, like bizarre, you know, absurdity for absurdity's sake, hat on hat humor throughout like the entire first few episodes. Then they really start get into the comedy. In terms of comedy, I'd say it was probably A tier. There's a lot of points in the show where you're just kind of like, dang, that's a very interesting take on the show, but you don't really hate it, you know? It's like just kind of interesting. It's basically revolves around all the weird individuals that go to school at a high school where they're all gangs. And yeah, it was a pretty interesting show. Next up, The Pet Girl of Sakura Hall. This one being one of the first few animes I watched. I think it was like maybe the 20th, somewhere around there anime that I saw. I definitely have a nostalgia aspect to it. I do think if I were to go back and rewatch it, I wouldn't like it as much as I did back then. Because back then I probably would have ranked it like SS tier. But now looking back on it, I think it's probably like either upper B tier or lower A tier. I'll probably put it on B tier just because we have to kind of try and balance out the charts. But yeah, it wasn't a bad watch in my opinion. You know, there were enjoyable parts to it. Some, you know, the main girl wants to become a manga artist, but she's a professional artist, but not everybody wants that for her. And so she's basically trying to make her own path. But at the same time, she's kind of how to describe it? I don't know if it's autism or something along that, but she's not incredibly high functioning on all aspects of that a normal person would be. So she kind of like needs some help with things, and I think that's kind of where it gets a little bit weird, was that like she needs that help, but the way they treat it doesn't really treat it like you would expect with someone who's on the spectrum or something like that. Yeah, overall it was when I first watched it, I really enjoyed it. I don't know if I'd rank it as high now though. Up next, we have Samurai Champloo. This one is very similar to Cowboy Bebop. Personally, I like this one a little bit better than Cowboy Bebop, just because, you know, hip-hop. Oh, actually, I don't know. I think I like the story about this one a little bit better than I did Cowboy Bebop, because this one seems to have kind of an overarching theme to it, whereas Cowboy Bebop seemed to have a more of a piecing together the history was the overarching plotline of the story. There's never like one overarching theme, or I guess overarching plot. Yeah, I guess there kind of is, but this one seems to be more involved in that. We're gonna put it in SS tier. Yeah, it's a fantastic watch. If you haven't seen it yet, I would recommend. I'm not a huge fan of shows before the 2000s, but that's one of the few ones where I loved it. Next up, Sasaki and Peeps. Another one where he can travel in between our world and another world, and he uses that ability to make a lot of money. Basic isekai at best. Next up, Angels of Death. Angels of Death is a kind of a... how to describe it? It's not a murder mystery. Basically, cruel people having cruel things done. No, that's not a good way to... we're going to abandon that thought. It's basically a person loses their memory and is climbing a tower, and the tower has some of the most twisted, demented people that you could ever meet in like more just sick ways. They're just like very sick in the head, like Joker, but not Joker, like a Joker alter or something along those lines. I guess that's a kind of a good way to put it, Joker alters. But yeah, basically she's trying to make it to the top of the tower. As you do that, she starts to remember things, and it was interesting in terms of show. I'd probably put it in A tier. It goes a little bit too much into the dark aspect of it for me to really want to put it higher, because it tries really hard to have like these really edgy moments in it that more often than not seems to kind of just bring the story back. But yeah, it was an interesting watch though. Up next, we have the Healer something or other. the Great Cleric. Believe it or not, it's an isekai. If you don't know what an isekai is, it's a basic. So yeah, C tier. I think there's only one joke throughout that entire show that I actually really liked. That was the whole fact that in order to become like really good at leveling up, he has to sacrifice like one of a few things. Like he has to sacrifice his emotions or something or other. And for him, he sacrificed his libido, which that was funny in the moment. Yeah, next up we have, I think if I remember correctly, this next one is an isekai. Yeah, the Demon Sword Master at Excalibur Academy. Basically, a sword master dies, gets reincarnated, and is like, yo, I'm gonna master the sword. If I remember correctly, if that's this one. Either way, it's basic, C tier. Up next, we have the good old classic Spirit Chronicles. A lot of people really like this one. I don't remember if it's an isekai or not, but it does take place in a Tolkien-esque fantasy. In terms of show, I'm honestly going to put it C tier. I know as in terms of like shows and everything, a lot of people will rank it higher. I just didn't think it was all that. It was actually, I guess it's kind of average, maybe, at best. But yeah, it's just kind of another dude gets stronger and stronger and saves people. Alright, up next we have Bunny Girl Senpai. It should come as no surprise to anybody that it's gonna rank fairly highly, especially since it seems to almost like deal with aberrations without aberrations, and I love aberrations in shows. But yeah, this one is a solid SS tier. You know, I have some friends who really didn't like the fact that it went away from, I think Mai was her name. They didn't really like the fact that it seemed to originally start with like a romance between them, then it kind of diverged and went into some of the other side characters. But personally, I loved the fact that it went to like other side characters who have different problems, and the way they work through the problems as well as like how the problems come to be, to me, were just super interesting. Alright, next up, I think this is like student council. Yeah, student council staff members. The student council staff members is a show where a dude joins the student council and they're basically staff members are weird. And by weird, I mean they talk about perverted things most of the time. It was a comedy. I don't think the comedy aspect really worked with it all that well. There are a few like ecchi-esque moments. If I remember correctly, this is the show, or actually I don't think it's this show. But yeah, they're basically just people making a bunch of like potty humor, penis jokes type thing. Overall, not a great show in my opinion, slightly below average. Next up we have Doomsday with Her Dog. Doomsday with Her Dog is a kind of similar to The Way of the House Husband, is shot like the comic itself, and it's all just like 4-koma, just on repeat, just basically a reading of a bunch of 4-koma with very slight animation done to it. The plot to the show kind of has a plot, but it being a 4-koma doesn't really have an overarching one. They probably could have done something with it similar to like what they did with Bocchi the Rock, where they like made it an overarching story despite being a 4-koma, but they decided just to do almost more of a manga reading, which was super interesting for that. I never was able to get too into it, but there were some pretty funny moments in time, and it was an enjoyable watch. Despite mainly being a comedy, I don't remember if I laughed all too much at it, but I did enjoy it. More of one of those shows where you enjoy it, but don't find it funny, I guess. But yeah, next up, Assassin Reincarnated, another isekai. I know some people really like this one. It's like the world's first class assassin or finest assassin is reincarnated as an aristocrat. C tier, it's an anime, an isekai anime. Next up we have Sekko Boys. This one is another one of those ones similar to Akikan and whatever that other one was that I mentioned, where it's just fun to watch for the fact that you can say you watched it, for the meme. Basically a bunch of statues of guys who, I guess like you have Julius Caesar and all that on there, as they try to become like famous idols almost, and it's like about the story of their manager having to manage all the different statues because the statues can talk and everything, and it's one of those shows where you watch it and it's just a fever dream of a show, but you're there for the fever dream. Looking back on it though, well, yeah, looking back on it, it's B tier. It's slightly above average because the concept of it is so bizarre. Other than that, though, not really all that worth watching. Next we have Spirited Away. Spirited Away, honestly, I'm probably not going to rank it as high as some other people. I'm putting it S tier just because there were a few points in the show where the plot didn't seem to make a whole lot of sense. And whenever a plot doesn't make a whole lot of sense, I tend to be a little bit more adverse to it. And Spirited Away was one of those shows where they had like a very interesting plot to it, but it's at some point in time it's just kind of like, I don't really get what's happening, because you have the plot and the way you have the initial introduction of it is she needs to save her parents, and so she works a job, and then so you kind of have it set up where you have the beginning, that's the plot, the second, then at the very end when she actually saves her parents, and then there's everything in between that can kind of go anywhere they want with the story, and they kind of did that, which threw me off a bit, but it was still pretty easy to get invested in moments here and there. But yeah, up next we have My Senpai is Annoying. This is one of the first manga that I ever bought on Crunchyroll, and that was also one of the first manga I ever read. And in terms of manga, it's really good. I really like the story, how they kind of took all the short stories from the manga and put it into the anime. They made them a little bit longer, which I think works a little bit better with the show. But overall, I really enjoyed the show. It's a romance. Like most romance in anime, though, it takes a while to actually discuss, actually get into the fact that they're gonna fall in love. I don't even think they've done that in the manga yet. I'm unsure on that, though. I haven't bought the most recent ones to get caught up on it. But yeah, this one is in terms of show, I'd probably say an S tier. It's a bit annoying that it takes so long for them to get into the romance, but I like the characters quite a bit on that. And there's also the side characters who fall in love, and they progress a little bit faster. Up next, we have The Combatants Will Be Dispatched. This one, if I remember correctly, is written by the same creator of Konosuba. But to me, it kind of felt like, well, it makes sense, the fact that this feels a lot like Konosuba, but at the same time, it feels just too similar to it, where, honestly, I would have rather just had another season of Konosuba than have this. The show itself isn't bad, but I probably think it's a B tier just because it honestly feels kind of like a Konosuba knockoff. Like, the characters they just feel too similar a lot of times. Up next, Servant Service. I quite like this one. I've been trying to get my friend to watch it for quite a while. Don't know if that's ever gonna happen. But yeah, some of the comedy aspects in are funny, but if you've ever worked in a service job, they kind of stereotype people that work within those jobs, so you can kind of figure out like who your friend is that you worked with, and they a lot of times will have that kind of stereotype. Like there's that one person who somehow manages to be lazy 24/7 despite like that not being their job. But I'm gonna put in SS tier. The opening too was super interesting to it. I quite liked the opening. I'm not gonna play it just because I don't want to get copyright for music or anything, but overall fantastic show. Up next we have The Helpful Fox Senko-san. This is also one of the I watched this one. This is one of the first seasonals I ever watched. Whenever going to watch it though, at the beginning I was like, yo, I love foxes. Foxes are like the greatest animal out there. So whenever I get to start it, I was like, oh man, let's get really into this. Like I love foxes, and this is about a fox character. Haven't seen very many anime that actually have a fox character. Most of the time it's like cat or wolf, and occasionally dog. But this one had fox, and I was like, let's freaking go. Honestly, it was kind of painful to watch though, because it's so slow, and it's basically this person is helping out a man who, I don't know, struggles like with day-to-day life because he works a hard job. Which, I mean, Japanese work culture, it makes sense that when you come home you're like super stressed and just want to relax. But the idea of like the fox being there, it was honestly more than anything kind of weird. And there's like this whole other fox character that you're introduced to at some point in time, and they don't like that character at all. She's like, the only way to truly calm a man down is to bang him, and it's like, this is going weird. It was very wholesome before, now you're going the ecchi route, alright. But yeah. I am probably gonna do another 5 shows, and then we will call it quits there. But yeah, we've made a decent chunk. We'll probably be able to finish on the next stream. But yeah, all right. So for the 5th to last one, we have Shadow's House. Shadow's House has a super interesting premise. I loved the idea of the mystery of it. The main character, the fact that she's so like go lucky happy, was kind of weird. I didn't really like that part of the show, but other than the main character being the main character, it was fairly good. I'll probably put it in A tier just because the mystery I thought was really well done, in the sense that like everything that's happening makes sense but doesn't. And so it's like at no point in time are you really able to actually piece it together, but you're still like really invested in it because they're doing enough to keep you on track. All right. Next we have Shangri-La Frontier, which, fun fact, I'm pretty sure I have dyslexia, and whenever I read words like this, a lot of times I'll see it and I'll be like, yeah, I know how that's pronounced, without actually reading it. So I just mostly see the shape of the word. And whenever I see the shape of the word, I'm like, the shape of the word looks like it'll be pronounced this way. And so for the longest time, I called it the Sharangalang Frontier. And so that's what the show is for me now. I actually had to read out the name in order to actually get it right. So yeah, Sharangalang Frontier. This is a, honestly, in terms of show, I'd probably put it in S tier. It's pretty easy to get invested into it, but I don't know if I really truly enjoyed the premise a ton. It's like one of those shows where you get really invested in it despite not really wanting to. And so whenever this show kind of came out and like introduced itself as the Sword Art Online of the season, I was kind of like, don't know if I don't know if I'm gonna be a huge fan of it. Like, I'll give it a shot. And with the whole premise of being similar to Sword Art Online, I didn't love it a ton. The animation style, as well as like some of the characters and the comedy done in it, I thought was done really well. So despite me not liking the premise, I did enjoy the show. So for that reason, we're putting it up in S tier. Now we have the herbivore dragon something or other lives for like 5,000 years. A herbivorous dragon of 5,000 years get unfairly villainized. It was an interesting watch. It's another Chinese show where I know a lot of shows made in China kind of have this problem where they have a plot, and as they're going through the plot, at some point in time, the show just seems to forget what the plot was. And this show is no exception to that category. For that reason, I don't think I can rate it too high. I'll probably only rate it as a B, above average. It's nothing terrible. It wasn't a painful watch or anything, or really bad, but it just, one of those shows that's kind of better to turn on the side. Up next, we have Your Lion April. I don't care what you think, it's an SSS tier. I watch it every April. It's a fantastic show. I love crying to the ending. It's great all around. It's about music. It has a sad ending. It has a somber mood throughout the entire show. You know, it's like hits so many different categories. It's a romance. You know that it's these are all just things. The only thing that could make this better, where I guess like hit kind of the area, kind of hit my list of shows that I enjoy, is if it had an aberration in it or something, but I honestly think that would ruin the show, so I'm really glad they didn't. But yeah, overall, 10 out of 10 show. Would recommend. Try to get all my friends to watch it, mostly so I can laugh at them for crying at an anime, but fantastic show. Also, the opening, I'm not sure how. I truly have no idea how, but before I watched the show, I was scrolling through, I think, Instagram Reels, because that's how I found most of the anime way early on. Whenever I wanted to watch it, I would go through Instagram Reels and see a clip of a funny clip from an anime, and I'd be like, oh, that's going to be the show that I watch next. I'm scrolling on Instagram, I see this clip. It's like, I have no idea how, but everybody seems to know the words to this song. Haven't seen Your Line April at all. Hadn't even heard of it at that point. But I guess at some point in time, I had gone through so many Reels that I had heard the opening song enough times that whenever it played, I was actually able to sing the first part of the chorus word for word correctly, despite having never even seen the show, which was one of the most bizarre things, because I heard it and I was like, I don't even know what this is from. Like, why do I know the words? But But yeah, it was a fantastic watch. Would recommend 10 out of 10. Up next, we have probably what I consider to be the best Chinese animated shows ever done, Link Click. Link Click is a time travel show, like a time travel murder mystery-esque show, where the characters are fighting like something that they have no idea, but they can travel back into time via pictures. So if a picture of a moment, they can go back into that picture. Most of the time they use it to gather information, and they kind of have the rule of don't change the past. But one of them changes the past, and it's like really interesting how it kind of develops. I've seen a few video essays on it. One person said that they liked it, but they didn't like how it, like, they liked it better when it was more slice of lifey than drama. But I thought that they did a really good job of setting out from the beginning that there was going to be drama in this show. They did really good job foreshadowing it. They did enough where they actually like led into it and did well enough of a transition that it wasn't bad like a lot of comedy shows do. Yeah, overall, another 10 out of 10 shows, SSS tier. But yeah, so this is the list for today. I'm not sure how many shows we managed to get through, but it was a solid chunk, and yeah, I think we'll probably be able to get through the rest of them on Thursday at 12 p.m. Mountain Time is whenever the stream will start. And yeah, if you guys can make it, I hope to see you there. And have a fantastic rest of your day.